The hangar doors groaned as the small, weathered jet rolled onto the tarmac, its wheels sparking faintly against the cracked concrete. Rust streaked along its silver fuselage, faded markings from decades of service barely visible under layers of grime and patchwork repairs. A group of young pilots in crisp flight suits gathered nearby, boots clattering against the ground. Their laughter was sharp, harsh, echoing across the open airfield. "Who even flies that thing anymore?" one snickered, nudging the next. "Looks like it belongs in a museum." Their voices carried a mix of curiosity and scorn, eyes wide with the thrill of mockery. They didn't know the stories, didn't know the ghosts embedded in the metal of this old fighter. Captain Elena Ramirez, standing beside the jet, didn't flinch. Her hands rested lightly on the fuselage, tracing the dents, scratches, and faded insignias. Each mark told a story, a near miss over hostile territory, a thunderous landing in a desert storm, a mission where every maneuver had meant life or death. She could feel the hum of the engines beneath her fingertips, alive and waiting as though aware of the crowd's mockery. The Phantom wasn't just a jet, it was a survivor like her. Elena adjusted her aviator sunglasses, letting her gaze sweep over the young pilots. Their bravado was almost comical, yet she sensed the undercurrent of doubt. They were testing her, wondering if the old warbird could even fly properly, let alone maneuver against modern jets. She knew their laughter was temporary, fragile, and she welcomed it. Legends weren't proved on paper, they were proved in motion. The commander's voice suddenly cut through the air, authoritative and calm. "Attention!" The laughter faltered, the snickers halting mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward the source. A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, the lines of his face hardened by decades in the Air Force. His eyes, sharp and calculating, landed on the Phantom. "You're not laughing when she's airborne," he said, voice low but carrying across the tarmac. There was no need for theatrics. His presence alone commanded attention. Elena's chest tightened, not with fear but with anticipation. The commander knew. He had flown this very jet decades ago in classified operations, missions that were still whispered about in hushed tones across airbases. He understood what the young pilots couldn't see. The Ghosthawk wasn't defined by age or scratches. It was defined by experience, by the hands that had flown it through impossible odds. And now, it was her turn to prove it. The young pilots exchanged uneasy glances. A few muttered, "Old relic," but their voices lacked conviction. Elena climbed the ladder into the cockpit, each step deliberate. The metal creaked under her weight, a reminder that the Phantom had seen more than any of them could imagine. Once inside, she ran her hands across the worn control panel, fingers brushing the engraved letters of old mission codes. Each switch, each button, carried decades of history. She didn't just know how to fly this jet, she understood it. Outside, the wind picked up, tugging at flight suits and hair. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised, eager to catch every moment. Some were still skeptical, others already sensing something extraordinary about to unfold. Elena adjusted her helmet, checked her instruments, and took a deep breath. The Phantom's engines whined faintly, a growl beneath the roar of the wind. She felt the pulse of the old warbird resonate through her body, the anticipation electric. "Ready when you are, Captain," the ground crew called, though their eyes betrayed their curiosity. No one wanted to be the first to admit they were nervous. Elena gave a small nod, her eyes hidden behind reflective shades, her jaw set with determination. With a slow, deliberate push, she engaged the throttle. The Phantom trembled beneath her, alive with energy, ready to remind the world what it was capable of. The wheels lifted from the ground. Sparks kissed the tarmac as the jet surged forward, the sound escalating from a low hum to a deafening roar. The hangar doors rattled in protest. Elena's heart raced, not from fear but from exhilaration. The young pilots watched, mouths agape, their laughter swallowed by the roar of engines. She banked slightly, letting the Phantom flex its wings, the sunlight catching the scratches and dents in a way that made the jet appear both ancient and immortal. And then the impossible happened. The jet responded with an agility that no one expected. It tilted sharply, turned with precision, and gained altitude effortlessly. The wind whipped past the crowd, phones shaking in hands, hair plastered to faces. Alina glanced down, seeing the stunned expressions of the very pilots who had mocked her mere minutes ago. The commander, standing perfectly still, arms crossed, allowed a small smile to play across his lips. He had flown this plane, known its secrets, and now he watched as Alina brought the Ghosthawk back to life. Her mind flashed with memories, thunderstorms over the desert, missiles tearing past, nights when only instinct had saved her. Every maneuver was a testament to survival, skill, and courage. She wasn't just flying, she was communicating decades of history through every tilt, every dive, every rise into the sky. The young pilots were starting to understand. They had mocked her old jet, but they hadn't mocked what it represented. A gust of wind rattled the hangar doors. Alina leveled the Phantom, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The commander's voice carried over the roar of the engines once more, quieter this time, almost a whisper to himself. Let them see. And with that, the tension on the tarmac became almost unbearable. The young pilots, the crew, even the ground control, all waited, hearts pounding, for the next move. They didn't yet know that the old Phantom, the so-called relic, was about to rewrite their understanding of skill, courage, and legend. The Ghosthawk was awake, and Alina Ramirez was about to show them why no one should ever laugh at what they don't understand. The Phantom climbed higher, leaving the dusty tarmac and the skeptical eyes of the crowd far below. Alina felt the familiar tremor of the engines beneath her, the vibrations of a plane that had survived more than most pilots could imagine. She could feel the old metal responding to her every subtle movement, as if it recognized the hands of someone who had flown through storms and death together. The wind tore past the canopy, whipping at her helmet straps and carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and ozone. Below, the hangar and airfield looked smaller, almost toy-like, against the vast expanse of sky. The younger pilots still gaped from the ground, phones shaking in their hands as they attempted to record every second. "How is she doing that?" one whispered, voice trembling with disbelief. They had been sure the old Phantom would sputter, stall, or fail, yet it moved with a fluid grace that modern jets struggled to match. Alina pushed the controls further, testing the jet's limits, twisting into turns that would have rattled lesser aircraft. She was aware of their eyes on her, but she didn't perform for them. She performed for the plane, for herself, for the ghosts of missions that had shaped both pilot and machine into legends. As she climbed into the thinner air, memories hit her with sharp intensity. Flashbacks of hostile skis in Afghanistan, sandstorms blinding her, missiles tearing the air past her wings, her squadron's radios crackling with fear as each plane faced its own peril. She remembered the engine failures, the last-minute maneuvers that kept her alive when her wingman wasn't so lucky. The Phantom had been her guardian, a silent partner through every impossible mission. And now, decades later, she was proving that it was far from obsolete. The commander's voice crackled over the radio, calm, measured, authoritative. "Ramirez, demonstrate the barrel roll." Alina's fingers tightened on the control stick. She smiled beneath the helmet. The young pilots below flinched at the words. None of them had the courage or the skill to attempt such a maneuver in this delicate, aged warbird. But Alina wasn't just anyone. She took a deep breath, scanning the horizon, feeling the wind, the pressure, the heartbeat of the plane itself. She rolled the Phantom sharply, the earth spinning below in dizzying streaks of green and gray. The jet responded perfectly, every movement a blend of instinct and decades of experience. She dipped, twisted, and leveled again, as though the plane were an extension of her own body. The younger pilots on the ground were frozen. One whispered, barely audible over the roar of engines, "It's impossible." Their laughter had vanished, replaced by awe, disbelief, and a creeping sense of fear, fear of what they had underestimated. Lightning streaked across the distant clouds, thunder booming in sync with the Phantom's roar. Alina's mind went back to the night skis over hostile territory, dodging missiles and navigating storms that seemed insurmountable. Each movement now was informed by those memories, by the ghosts of flights that had tested every ounce of her skill. She felt the plane shudder under the strain of maneuvers it hadn't performed in years, but it held, obedient to her command. Suddenly she caught movement in her peripheral vision, a sleek, modern F-22 streaking across the horizon, cutting through clouds with terrifying precision. The younger pilots on the ground gasped, some frozen with fear, some gripping their phones so tightly they could barely record. The F-22 approached, intercepting her flight path. Alina's pulse spiked. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. This was a test, and the modern fighter was fast, deadly, designed to dominate skies like these. But she didn't flinch. The Phantom had survived worse. Her radio crackled again. "Identify yourself," a voice demanded. Alina's lips pressed into a firm line. She responded simply, deliberately, with the call sign she hadn't used in years. "Ghosthawk." Silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, the F-22 pilot's voice answered. "Confirmed. Ghosthawk is in the air. All systems acknowledged." Below, the young pilots froze, their mouths slack, eyes wide. The commander, standing motionless on the tarmac, allowed a rare, almost imperceptible smile to play across his weathered features. He saluted, an acknowledgement not just of the pilot, but of the legend she carried in the fuselage beneath her. The Ghosthawk wasn't just a story whispered in hangars. It was alive, real, and proving itself in ways that defied logic and mocked the arrogance of the present. Alina's thoughts raced. The F-22 wasn't here to fight, it was here to test. And she had seconds to prove that a plane built decades ago, patched together with worn metal and memories, could still outmaneuver the most advanced aircraft of the 21st century. She banked sharply, feeling the Phantom groan but respond, a living testament to skill, courage, and unbreakable trust between pilot and machine. The younger pilots watched as the Phantom twisted and turned, a blur against storm-dark skies. They could barely comprehend what they were witnessing. One of them muttered, "It's dancing." The commander's eyes never left the display, watching every movement, every dive, every impossible maneuver. He knew, as Alina did, that this was more than a flight demonstration. It was a declaration. The old planes, the forgotten pilots, the legends of a bygone era, none of it was irrelevant. Experience and courage still mattered. Alina dove through clouds, emerging into sunlight that glinted off the Phantom's scratched and patched fuselage. Every dent, every faded emblem, every streak of rust seemed to glow with history, with purpose. She could feel the plane's pulse, its readiness to respond to every instinct, every twitch of her muscles. Below, the airfield crew, young pilots and even seasoned veterans, were silent, captivated by the spectacle. What had started as mockery had transformed into awe. The Phantom wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Then the commander's voice came over the radio again, softer this time, almost reverent. "Let them see what Ghosthawk can do." Alina smiled beneath her visor. She wasn't performing for the crowd. She wasn't performing for the F-22 or the skeptics. She was performing for the plane, for the history it carried, for the countless missions where her skill and courage had been the only thing keeping her alive. The Phantom roared into the wind, a living creature awakened, defying expectation, challenging history, and rewriting the understanding of what was possible. And far below, on the tarmac, every mocking laugh had vanished. Every eye was fixed upward, every breath caught in awe. The legend of the Ghosthawk was alive, and Alina Ramirez was proving it. The storm clouds gathered on the horizon, tension building, the roar of engines mingling with the first rumble of thunder. And yet, amidst the chaos and the skepticism, one undeniable truth remained. The Ghosthawk was not just a relic, it was a force. And in the hands of Alina Ramirez, no one, no modern jet, no doubting pilot, would ever question its power again. The crowd on the tarmac had gone silent, though their phones still trembled in anxious hands. The young pilots who had mocked Alina Ramirez and her antique Phantom now looked up in disbelief. Their laughter had dissolved into awe, their disbelief into confusion. How could an old, battered jet, patched together with years of wear and rust, move with such fluidity, such precision? The air seemed to vibrate with the Phantom's energy, every turn and bank punctuated by the groan of aged metal that somehow refused to break. Alina pushed the Phantom harder, climbing higher into the thickening clouds. Lightning flickered on the horizon, illuminating the jet's scarred fuselage in sharp, dramatic streaks. Her visor reflected streaks of sunlight slicing through the storm, a battlefield glow that only those who had flown in danger could truly understand. She remembered desert nights, the scent of ozone and sandstorm in her lungs, fingers gripping the control stick as missiles streaked past her wings. Each memory surged through her like electricity, infusing every maneuver with instinct honed from years of survival. Below, the young pilot's skepticism turned to panic. Some muttered, "It's insane," while others barely dared to breathe, their eyes locked on the Phantom as it twisted in impossible arcs. One brave lieutenant shouted, How is it still flying like that?" Alina didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Phantom itself spoke through its roar, its graceful defiance of physics, and its uncanny response to the touch of a master pilot. It was alive, more alive than any modern fighter the base had ever produced. The F-22 from the previous demonstration streaked across the sky again, a sleek predator slicing through clouds, attempting to match her movements. The young pilots froze. The F-22 was fast, lethal, cutting-edge technology built to dominate airspace. Yet the Phantom, despite decades of wear, maneuvered in ways the modern jet could barely follow. Alina could see the subtle corrections the F-22 pilot had to make, the micro-adjustments to anticipate her unpredictable movements. The old jet groaned, shivered, and screamed, but it obeyed her like a living creature, every instinct and reaction precisely in sync. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Is she even real?" someone whispered. Another muttered, "She's untouchable." Alina remembered the early days of her career, how she had been underestimated because of her age, her appearance, her youth. Yet now, decades later, the irony was undeniable. It was the antique that dominated the skis. She dipped into a sharp dive, banking low over the field. The wind tore past the tarmac in powerful gusts, throwing dust and debris across the hangar. The younger pilots scattered back instinctively, phones trembling in their hands, some unable to lift them to capture the Phantom's motion. The jet swooped, dipped, and climbed again, drawing loops and arcs that defied expectation. It wasn't just maneuvering, it was a dance, a symphony of control, danger, and skill. Every second was high tension, every movement a declaration that experience outweighed modernity. Then came the sharpest test, a sudden gust from the gathering storm, a burst of turbulent air that could have tossed the jet into chaos. Alina's knuckles whitened as she adjusted the controls, feeling the Phantom twist under her guidance. It groaned, but it held. The storm was no match for decades of engineering, experience, and instinct working together. Below, the crowd's whispers rose into gasps and murmurs of awe. The commander remained silent, his eyes narrowing in calculated assessment, his jaw tight with pride. He knew the jet, he knew the pilot, and he knew what they were seeing was not mere spectacle, it was history, alive in motion. Lightning flared across the sky again, illuminating a streak of the Phantom's silver fuselage as it dived through clouds and back up toward the sun. Alina felt the adrenaline surge, the sharp, familiar rush of being alive against impossible odds. Memories of past missions flashed, navigating hostile skis alone, the engine on fire, smoke filling the cockpit as she executed maneuvers that were impossible for most pilots. She had survived because she understood the machine, understood physics, understood the sky itself. And now, in the presence of skeptics and the modern Air Force, she was proving it once more. A young pilot below gasped, "She's defying it." Another whispered, "No plane should do that." They didn't understand, couldn't understand, the years of experience, the countless missions, the bond between pilot and aircraft. Alina flew not for recognition, but for the thrill, for the knowledge that the Ghosthawk could still dominate. Every move, every twist, every dive was a testament to survival, to courage, and to the quiet pride of a pilot who had earned her legend. The commander's voice came over the loudspeakers again, calm and firm. "Ramirez, execute the last maneuver, the vertical climb." Alina's pulse quickened. This was the maneuver the Phantom had earned its reputation for decades ago, a near-vertical ascent that tested both the pilot's skill and the structural limits of the plane. She adjusted the throttle, feeling the engines roar in compliance, pushing the plane skyward. The tarmac below shrank rapidly as she climbed, clouds enveloping her in a white haze. Her vision tunneled, every instrument and movement critical, every fraction of a second a matter of survival. From below, the young pilots watched, mesmerized and terrified. This wasn't a show. It was a lesson in precision, in courage, in defiance of expectation. The Phantom screamed upward, an old warbird challenging the modern world, defying logic, carrying decades of history in a single, unstoppable motion. Some pilots had tears in their eyes, not from fear, but from the sheer realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary. As she reached the apex, Alina felt the familiar jolt of vertigo, the thrill of danger. She adjusted the controls, letting the Phantom level out with pinpoint precision. The engines wheezed, the fuselage groaned, but the plane was alive, radiant under the sun breaking through storm clouds. Below, the crowd erupted, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in awe. Alina's eyes met the commander, and he nodded once, a salute of respect. The Phantom, the Ghosthawk, had silenced the doubters. But even as the crowd gasped and whispered, Alina knew this was just the beginning. The young pilots would try to replicate her maneuvers, the skeptics would spread rumors of the jet's impossible capabilities, and somewhere the modern F-22 pilot was observing, evaluating. The air was charged, the storm rolling in closer, the tension building. The Ghosthawk had proven itself, but now the real test was looming, and the legend was far from complete. Alina felt it deep in her bones. The sky itself was alive, waiting, and the story of the Ghosthawk was only beginning. Every eye below had seen part of the legend, but the full truth, what the Phantom could truly do, was yet to be revealed. And somewhere in the clouds, the future and the past were about to collide in ways that no one could predict. The sky had darkened, clouds rolling in with a warning, thunder grumbling in the distance like a predator stalking its prey. Alina Ramirez felt the pulse of the Phantom beneath her hands, the vibrations through the controls stick a familiar language she alone could read. Each movement she made was precise, deliberate, the result of decades of experience. Below, the young pilots on the tarmac could only watch, mouths agape, as the weather mirrored the tension in the air. Lightning forked across the horizon, illuminating the Phantom's battered fuselage with fleeting brilliance, and Alina felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years. The F-22 hovered nearby in the distance, sleek, intimidating, a modern predator built to dominate any airspace. Its pilot was silent, calculating, matching her maneuvers with frightening precision. Alina didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid of the jet. She was a master of the skis, and the Phantom had been her partner through situations far more deadly. Her eyes scanned the horizon, measuring wind currents, cloud density, and the subtle shifts in air pressure. Every variable mattered. One mistake, one misjudged angle, and this demonstration could turn into disaster. Her radio crackled. The commander's voice, calm but commanding, cut through the roar of engines and wind. Ramirez, show them what the Phantom can do. Execute the vertical climb. Alina's pulse quickened. The vertical climb was legendary, one of the maneuvers that had earned the Phantom its fearsome reputation decades ago. Many said it was impossible, that modern planes could surpass it. But the Ghosthawk was not just metal, it was history, experience, and instinct, alive under her control. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, and adjusted the throttle. The Phantom responded immediately, roaring as it tilted upward, engines screaming in defiance. Clouds enveloped her, the world outside turning white and chaotic, but Alina's focus never wavered. Her fingers danced over the controls, muscles moving on instinct, memory, and experience fused into a single precise rhythm. She recalled missions in hostile territories, nights when the engine had failed mid-flight, and the only thing keeping her alive had been her understanding of the plane as an extension of herself. This was no different. The climb demanded everything she had and everything the Phantom could give. Below, the crowd grew silent, the air electric with tension. Young pilots, once laughing and mocking, now stared upward, disbelief etched into every face. Some whispered, "She's untouchable," while others simply couldn't speak, their phones shaking as they tried to capture what they were witnessing. The Phantom sliced through clouds with terrifying speed, vertical against gravity, engine straining but holding. Lightning illuminated the jet as it climbed, the wind howling past in a scream. Every second was a calculated dance of risk and precision. The F-22 attempted to match her ascent, jet thrusters screaming in protest. Modern technology met old ingenuity in a deadly contest. The Phantom shuddered under the strain, groaning like a living creature testing its limits, but it held. Alina felt the familiar thrill of adrenaline surge through her, the sharp, exhilarating rush that only came when danger and skill intersected perfectly. She leaned into the climb, trusting every twitch of the control stick, every adjustment of the throttle. She wasn't just flying, she was commanding history itself. Memories of past missions surged through her mind. Desert storms, narrow escapes, engine failures, hostile fire. Each memory sharpened her reflexes, each moment a reminder of what she was capable of. The Phantom responded perfectly, each tilt, each twist, each near-vertical climb executed with breathtaking precision. The F-22 struggled to keep pace, its pilot's voice tense over the comms. "This isn't possible. She's pushing limits no one should survive." Alina smiled beneath her helmet, though no one could see it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was proving something older, wiser, and far more dangerous than modern technology. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the Phantom as it climbed higher, higher than anyone had dared in decades. Alina felt the plane strain, feel her weight, feel her instinct. She adjusted slightly, banking to avoid a gust of turbulent wind that could have thrown the aircraft into chaos. The F-22 mirrored her movements, but there was something in the Phantom's rhythm that no modern machine could replicate. History, intuition, and survival instinct fused into mettle and skill. Below, the commander's expression was unreadable, though his hand moved unconsciously to his cap in a gesture of respect. "That's the Ghosthawk," he murmured, almost to himself, his voice low but filled with pride. The young pilots on the ground were no longer laughing. Awe had replaced ridicule, fear and admiration mingled in their expressions. They had underestimated the old Phantom and the pilot who commanded it. Suddenly, Alina executed a sudden dive from the vertical climb, cutting through the clouds in a breathtaking display of speed and agility. The wind roared past, the engine screaming, and the Phantom twisted sharply, evading a gust of turbulent air that could have destabilized lesser planes. She emerged below the F-22, banking sharply, forcing the modern fighter to react. The crowd below gasped. Phones were shaking in their hands. The ground crew held their breath. The F-22 pilot tried to intercept, but every move Alina made was precise, measured, almost impossible. She felt the old Phantom respond beneath her, every vibration, every groan of the metal guiding her like an old friend. This wasn't about speed alone. It was skill, intuition, experience, and courage fused together, and the Ghosthawk had decades of all of it. The commander's voice came over the radio once more, steady and low. "Ramirez, they're watching. Show them the full power of history." Alina nodded slightly, adjusting the controls. The Phantom responded instantly, banking hard into a series of impossibly tight turns, slicing through clouds and storm wind. The young pilots watched, awe and fear written across their faces. The laughter, the ridicule, the mockery, it was gone. Only disbelief remained. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the Phantom's scratched and patched fuselage in brilliant streaks of white. Alina pushed the engines to their limits, trusting the plane, trusting her instincts, trusting every ounce of experience that had brought her to this moment. The Phantom roared in response, alive, aware, a living testament to the skill of its pilot. Below, the crowd collectively held its breath. They knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Alina leveled the Phantom, rising above the clouds just enough to see the horizon stretched out before her. The F-22 stayed nearby, silent, observing, almost acknowledging her dominance. The Phantom had survived decades of ridicule, decades of war, and decades of neglect. And now, in the hands of Alina Ramirez, it was proving that true mastery could never be replaced by technology alone. The storm rumbled closer, a reminder that even legends must face challenges. But Alina was ready. The Ghosthawk had been tested, had survived, and now it had the chance to prove itself in a way no one could have predicted. And as the wind howled past, the tension on the ground and in the sky grew. Everyone watching knew the story was far from over. Something bigger, something impossible was about to unfold, and the Ghosthawk would lead the way. The phantom sliced through the storm-choked sky, the wind shrieking past the cockpit like a chorus of ancient ghosts. Alina Ramirez gripped the control stick, fingers steady despite the chaos around her. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with the thrill of testing limits few pilots had ever approached. The F-22 hovered nearby, sleek and deadly, its radar locked onto the Phantom. Modern technology versus a warhorse of the past. The young pilots on the ground could hardly comprehend the spectacle unfolding above them. The laughter had long since vanished. In its place was awe, disbelief, and a growing sense of fear. Alina adjusted the Phantom's throttle, feeling the engine strain but respond, their groan almost musical beneath her hands. Memories surged. Nights in hostile skis over deserts and mountains, dodging missiles and flak, racing against the edge of disaster. The Phantom had survived every challenge she had thrown at it, and now, decades later, it was proving itself again. She banked sharply, the aircraft twisting through the turbulent air with a grace that defied physics. Every young pilot below craned their necks, jaws dropping, unable to turn away. Then came the moment that would forever cement the Phantom's legend. Through the clouds, a figure emerged, a modern F-22 cutting through the storm with a Predator's precision. The air shimmered from its supersonic speed. The young pilots froze. This was no casual demonstration. The F-22 was built to dominate, to overpower, to outperform anything in the sky. But the Phantom was already in motion, a veteran of 100 impossible missions, and Alina trusted it as she would no other plane. Her radio crackled, tension thick in the air. "Identify yourself," a calm but commanding voice demanded. Alina's lips pressed into a firm line and she responded deliberately, "Ghosthawk." A pause. Then unmistakably the F-22 pilot's voice came back, almost reverent. "Confirmed. Ghosthawk is in the air. All systems acknowledged." Below, the young pilots staggered. Their disbelief was palpable. The commander, standing still on the tarmac, allowed a slow, rare smile. His weathered eyes glimmered with pride, and his hand went up in an almost imperceptible salute. The Phantom's reputation, one built over decades of secret missions, impossible maneuvers, and survival against all odds, was alive, acknowledged even by the most advanced modern technology. Alina's pulse surged. She knew the F-22 was not here for spectacle. It was a test, a challenge, an acknowledgement of skill. And the Phantom, old, patched, scarred, would rise to meet it. She banked sharply, executing a dive that would have shredded lesser aircraft. The wind screamed past the canopy, the clouds flashing with lightning, and the engines roared in harmony with her heartbeat. Every movement was precise, deliberate, flawless. The young pilots below were no longer merely watching. They were holding their breath, caught in the tension of history colliding with the present. The F-22 tried to match her maneuvers, but Alina could see the subtle strain, the micro-adjustments it had to make to follow her. Every dive, every sharp bank, every near-impossible turn was a testament to decades of experience fused with instinct. The Phantom responded flawlessly, a living extension of Alina's skill and courage. She pushed it further, testing limits she hadn't approached in years, twisting through the storm, twisting through doubt, twisting through expectation. Lightning illuminated the Phantom's scarred fuselage in brilliant flashes, each dent and rusted seam a badge of honor. Alina thought of the missions that had carved these marks, the nights she had flown alone through hostile airspace, dodging radar, dodging missiles, trusting only herself and the plane beneath her. And now, the F-22, the pinnacle of modern technology, acknowledged her skill with its silent compliance. She leveled the Phantom, gliding briefly above the clouds, the sun breaking through in blinding streaks of light. The F-22 maintained position, almost respectful, almost hesitant. Below, the crowd erupted into whispers, the young pilots stunned into silence, One muttered, "It's unreal." Another whispered, "No plane should be able to do that." The commander's voice broke the tension softly over the radio. "That's the Ghosthawk." Elena allowed herself a small nod beneath her visor. The call sign wasn't just a name. It was a legacy, a story of survival, skill, and courage that spanned decades. The young pilots below had mocked, doubted, and laughed. Now they were witnessing the full revelation of the Ghosthawk, proof that legends never die. The F-22 pilot shifted slightly, circling, testing, but Elena anticipated each move, countering with precision honed through years of danger. The storm rumbled, wind tearing past the Phantom, lightning illuminating every scar. This was more than a demonstration. It was a battle of skill, a testament to history meeting modernity in a dance of mastery and respect. Elena's mind flashed to her squadron, lost in missions no one ever spoke of. She remembered their courage, their sacrifice, their trust in one another. The Phantom had carried them through danger, had survived, had endured, and now it carried her again, proving what true skill could achieve. Every maneuver was more than survival, it was storytelling. Every dive, every roll, every climb spoke of past triumphs, of secrets only a true pilot and their aircraft could understand. The storm thickened, tension building in the sky and on the tarmac below. Elena executed a sharp climb, then twisted sharply, banking through clouds in a breathtaking display. The F-22 attempted to intercept, but it was clear. The Phantom, though old, was alive with instinct, with history, with skill that no modern computer system could replicate. From below, the commander's voice came again, reverent almost to himself. "History isn't obsolete, skill isn't obsolete, courage isn't obsolete. Ghosthawk proves it all." The young pilots were silent, the awe almost painful to witness. Phones captured every movement, but no recording could convey the feeling, the emotion, the living legacy in motion above them. Elena leveled out, the Phantom's engines roaring in triumph. The clouds began to break, sunlight catching the scratches and faded emblems on the fuselage, making the jet appear both ancient and immortal. The F-22 hovered nearby, almost acknowledging defeat, almost saluting a legend that refused to die. On the ground, the younger pilots finally understood. The Ghosthawk wasn't a relic. It wasn't obsolete. It was history, alive and fierce, and in the hands of Elena Ramirez it was untouchable. And somewhere in the clouds the story was just beginning. A sudden gust rocked the Phantom, a reminder that danger was never far. Elena's pulse quickened. This was only the beginning. The young pilots, the crowd, the F-22, they had all witnessed the revelation. But what came next would test not only the Phantom's limits but Elena's courage in ways no one could predict. The Ghosthawk had proven itself, but the sky and the future were waiting. The clouds churned like boiling steel above the tarmac, lightning jagged and unpredictable, painting the sky in blinding streaks of white and blue. Elena Ramirez felt the Phantom's engine scream beneath her hands, a familiar vibration thrumming through her entire body. The storm wasn't just weather, it was a test, a challenge thrown by the sky itself, and the Phantom, though aged and scarred, responded with eager obedience. She gripped the control stick tightly, adjusting for turbulence, wind, and the sudden bursts of unpredictable air currents. Every micro-movement mattered. Every decision could mean survival or disaster. The F-22 flanked her once more, its sleek frame cutting through the clouds with lethal precision. Modern technology was built to dominate, to overwhelm, but Elena was calm. Her eyes scanned the horizon, reading subtle cues in wind direction, cloud density, and air pressure. She had flown through hurricanes, sandstorms, enemy fire, and night skies so dark that only instinct guided her. This was just another battlefield, and the Phantom responded to her commands like a living, breathing ally. Below, the ground crew and young pilots watched in tense awe. Phones rose shakily to capture the spectacle, but no camera could convey the intensity of the moment. The Phantom twisted through the sky, banking sharply, diving and climbing with a fluidity that defied belief. Every screech of metal and roar of engines told a story of survival, of skill, and of defiance against the mockery that had greeted the jet mere hours earlier. Alina leaned into a dive, the cockpit vibrating violently as the Phantom responded to her precise commands. Lightning illuminated the aircraft, revealing decades of wear, scratches, rust, patched metal, and faded emblems. Each mark was a testament to the missions that had defined its life, missions that had earned it the call sign Ghosthawk. Alina remembered those missions in vivid detail: narrow escapes, engine failures mid-flight, hostile fire racing past her wings. The Phantom had survived them all. And now it was showing the younger generation that legends do not fade, they endure. The F-22 pilot adjusted position, attempting to anticipate her moves, but the Phantom danced unpredictably, effortlessly defying the modern jet's calculations. Alina's pulse surged, not with fear but with exhilaration. Every maneuver required split-second decisions. Every angle tested both her skill and the Phantom's integrity. The older jet groaned under strain, metal screaming in protest, but it held. Alina felt the connection between pilot and aircraft as clearly as if it were another limb. Together, they were unstoppable. A sudden gust of wind tore through the clouds, threatening to unbalance the Phantom. Alina's hands reacted instinctively, twisting the controls, adjusting the throttle, banking sharply. The storm raged, but the jet obeyed her every command. The F-22 attempted to mirror her, but the modern machine lacked the intuition of experience, the subtle understanding of the aircraft's limitations and potential. Alina smiled beneath her visor. This wasn't just skill, it was mastery born of decades of danger and trust. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the Phantom against a darkened sky, a streak of silver and rust racing through a storm of nature's fury. The young pilots on the ground gasped. Some whispered, almost reverently, "She's incredible." Others shook their heads in disbelief. Phones shook in hands, capturing every impossible move, but even the cameras couldn't convey the raw tension, the hair-raising danger, or the visceral awe of watching the Ghosthawk in motion. The commander's voice came over the radio, calm but filled with weight. "Ramirez, push it further. Show them what true mastery looks like." Alina nodded subtly, her eyes scanning the horizon for a gap in the storm. She adjusted the throttle, preparing for the maneuver that had earned the Phantom its legendary status, a rapid, twisting ascent that tested both machine and pilot to the limit. The F-22 followed cautiously, radar locked, but the Phantom's unpredictability made it impossible to anticipate. Alina executed the ascent flawlessly, the Phantom twisting violently, engines roaring, metal groaning under the strain. She felt the vibrations through her body, through her hands, through every nerve ending. This was more than flight. It was a dialogue between pilot and aircraft, a battle against physics, gravity, and expectation. Lightning forked above, illuminating the Phantom in brief, brilliant flashes, highlighting its scarred beauty. From below, the ground crew and young pilots were frozen in disbelief. The Phantom was not just surviving, it was dominating, outmaneuvering a modern jet with decades of technology advantage. Every dive, every twist, every sharp bank spoke to the skill, courage, and instinct that defined Alina Ramirez and the Ghosthawk. One young pilot whispered, "No plane should be able to do that." Another muttered, "It's alive." The storm thickened, wind gusting unpredictably, clouds boiling around them. The F-22 attempted an interception, but Alina anticipated every move, twisting the Phantom in ways that no computer or algorithm could predict. The jet was alive beneath her hands, responding to instinct, experience, and trust. She remembered her squadron, lost to missions that demanded everything, and she felt their presence in the rhythm of flight. The Phantom was carrying more than her. It carried history, survival, and the legacy of those who had flown it before. She leveled the Phantom briefly, gliding through a break in the clouds. Sunlight caught the patched fuselage, reflecting brilliance off its scars. The F-22 maintained position, observing, almost acknowledging the Phantom's supremacy. Below, the crowd began to murmur in awe. The young pilots who had mocked her mere hours ago were now silent, spellbound, grappling with the realization that the Ghosthawk was untouchable, even by the most advanced modern aircraft. Alina's pulse raced as she prepared for the final test, a daring dive and climb that would push the Phantom to the absolute limits of its design. She adjusted the throttle, banking into the clouds once more. The storm was at its fiercest, wind tearing past, lightning splitting the sky. The Phantom screamed in response, metal bending, engines roaring, a symphony of endurance and mastery. The F-22 attempted to match her dive, but it was clear the modern jet was reacting, calculating, struggling to keep pace with instinct, experience, and a pilot who had mastered not just the aircraft, but the sky itself. Alina twisted the Phantom sharply, emerging from the clouds in a breathtaking ascent, engines screaming, fuselage groaning. She had pushed it to the limit, and it had responded flawlessly. Below, the commander's voice carried over the radio, low and reverent. "That's the Ghosthawk." The young pilots were speechless. Awe, fear, and disbelief mingled in their faces. Phones recorded every moment, but none could capture the sheer intensity, the living legend in motion above them. Alina leveled the Phantom, scanning the storm-laden horizon. The test was not yet over, but she knew one undeniable truth: the Ghosthawk had proven itself again. The storm rumbled closer, a reminder that challenges were never finished. The young pilots on the tarmac were stunned silent, and even the F-22 hovered, acknowledging the unmatched skill and legacy above. Alina's eyes narrowed, determination sharpening. She was ready for whatever came next, the ultimate confrontation that would cement her place in history, and the Phantom's legend as the Ghosthawk that refused to be tamed. The storm had reached its crescendo, lightning streaking across a sky that felt like a battlefield, thunder rolling in low, menacing growls. Alina Ramirez felt the Phantom shiver beneath her, engines screaming, fuselage groaning with every violent gust. Her pulse pounded in rhythm with the plane's vibrations. The F-22 was there, cutting through the storm like a predator, every movement calculated, every microsecond a deadly precision strike. This was no longer a demonstration. This was a confrontation. The old Phantom, scarred and patched, was about to meet the pinnacle of modern air combat. Alina adjusted the throttle, the controls responding like extensions of her own body. Memories surged through her. Nights in hostile skies, missiles streaking past, engine failures that demanded instantaneous intuition, squadron mates lost in the chaos. Every mission had taught her to trust instinct over technology, skill over hardware. The Phantom wasn't just a plane, it was a partner, a living, breathing testament to experience, courage, and survival. And now it was facing the ultimate challenge. The F-22 attempted to close in, radar locked, missiles primed. Alina's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a test of skill, it was a test of survival, of history versus modernity. She twisted the Phantom sharply, banking through a jagged break in the clouds, feeling every microshift in air pressure, every resistance of the old metal. The Phantom responded flawlessly, groaning in protest but obeying every command. Below, the young pilots on the tarmac were frozen, mouths agape, unable to comprehend the spectacle above. Lightning illuminated the sky, reflecting off the Phantom's scarred fuselage, showing every dent, scratch, and patch as a badge of survival. Alina executed a near-vertical climb, engines roaring, canopy reflecting streaks of light and shadow. The F-22 mirrored her ascent, trying to anticipate her moves, but Alina's maneuvers were unpredictable, instinctive, born of decades of experience no modern computer or pilot could replicate. The storm raged around them, the tension palpable, the air vibrating with raw energy. Below, whispers rippled through the crowd. "She's impossible," one muttered. Another voice trembled, "No plane should be able to do that." The commander stood silently, awe etched into every line of his face. His hand rose slowly to his cap in a gesture of respect, acknowledging the living legend above him. The Ghosthawk was not just flying, it was rewriting history in real time, showing the younger generation, the skeptics, and even modern pilots what mastery truly meant. Alina dove sharply, twisting the Phantom through a series of rapid turns that sent wind roaring past the cockpit. The F-22 attempted an interception, missiles primed, but every move Alina made anticipated the modern fighter's calculations. The Phantom screamed, metal protesting, engine straining, but it held. It was alive, aware, responsive, a partner that knew her instinct, her skill, and her heart. Each maneuver was a statement. Legends don't fade, they endure. Lightning split the sky again, and Alina seized the moment. She banked sharply, diving through the storm, the Phantom twisting in ways no one believed possible. The F-22 attempted to follow but faltered, its sleek form unable to match the intuition, the instinct, and the raw experience driving the Phantom. Alina's heart raced, exhilaration blending with tension. She could feel every vibration, every strain, every push of air, and she responded with perfect synchronization. Below, the young pilots were in shock. Some whispered, "It's alive." Others shook their heads, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Phones recorded every motion, but even the cameras couldn't capture the energy, the danger, the sheer mastery of a veteran pilot commanding a legendary aircraft against a modern marvel. The Phantom was defying logic, rewriting expectations, proving that history and experience could still dominate the present. The storm roared louder, and Alina felt it like a living entity challenging her. She leaned into the Phantom's controls, executing a series of rapid barrel rolls and dives that pushed the aircraft to its limits. The engine screamed, the fuselage groaned, and the plane responded flawlessly. She thought of her squadron, of missions flown where survival seemed impossible. Every move now was informed by those memories, every decision a fusion of instinct and skill honed through years of survival. The F-22 attempted one final maneuver, banking aggressively, trying to corner the Phantom. Alina anticipated the move instantly. With a deft twist and sudden dive, she positioned the Phantom below, rising through a narrow gap in the clouds. The F-22, sleek and modern though it was, had been outmaneuvered. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the Phantom's victorious roar as it climbed, twisting through the storm, engines screaming. Below, the commander's voice cut through the radio, low and reverent. "That's the Ghosthawk." The crowd erupted into whispered awe and disbelief. The young pilots who had mocked the plane hours earlier were now silent, spellbound, staring upward with wide eyes. The Phantom wasn't just flying, it was triumphing, rewriting expectations, defying physics, history, and skepticism all at once. Alina leveled the Phantom, scanning the horizon. The F-22 maintained position, silent now, almost acknowledging its defeat. The storm was breaking, sunlight beginning to pierce through the clouds, illuminating the Phantom's patched and scarred fuselage like a warrior returning from battle. Every dent, every scratch, every faded insignia told a story of survival, courage, and mastery. And now, the world was seeing it for the first time. The young pilots were shaking, whispers of respect and fear mixing in the air. No one should underestimate it," one muttered. Another added, "She didn't just survive, she dominated." The commander saluted again, eyes glinting with pride. The Ghosthawk had silenced mockery, proven itself against the pinnacle of modern aviation, and secured its place in legend. Alina's pulse began to slow as she leveled the Phantom, engines roaring in triumph. The F-22 maintained a respectful distance, almost reverent, as if acknowledging the enduring skill of the pilot and her legendary aircraft. The crowd below erupted in awe, the young pilots now silent in the shadow of history being made before them. Alina gazed across the horizon, the storm clearing, the Phantom's roar echoing like a heartbeat in the sky. But even as the skies brightened, a sense of tension lingered. The Ghosthawk had proven itself, yes, but the world was watching now, and with attention came scrutiny, challenges, and new threats. Alina felt it in her bones. The legend was alive and the story wasn't finished. Somewhere beyond the clouds, in airspace unknown, the Ghosthawk would face tests that would demand every ounce of courage, skill, and instinct she had left. She allowed herself a small, victorious smile beneath her visor. The Ghosthawk had survived, dominated, and silenced the doubters. But the sky itself had reminded her of one eternal truth. Mastery was not static and legends were never finished. The final chapter of this encounter, the ultimate proof, was yet to come. The storm had passed, leaving the sky painted in fiery streaks of sunset, the clouds tinged gold and crimson. Elena Ramirez leveled the Phantom, feeling the vibrations beneath her hands, the pulse of decades-old engines resonating through every bone. Every maneuver, every dive, every impossible climb had led to this moment. The air was calm now, but the tension in the hearts of those watching was electric, the silence of awe palpable on the tarmac below. The Ghosthawk had faced modernity, challenged expectations, and emerged untouchable. The young pilots were still frozen in disbelief, their mouths open, phones dangling uselessly in trembling hands. Every mocking laugh from earlier had vanished, replaced by a reverent silence that spoke volumes. They whispered to one another, tentative, uncertain, as if voicing the reality of what they had witnessed might break the spell. It's real. She actually did it. No plane, no pilot should be able to do that. The commander's voice cut through the tense air, calm but filled with unmistakable pride. "That's the Ghosthawk," he said again, more firmly this time. His salute was deliberate, unwavering, a gesture that carried decades of respect and recognition. Not just for Elena Ramirez, but for the aircraft itself. A plane long dismissed as obsolete, now standing as proof that true mastery and experience could eclipse modern technology. Elena's visor reflected the dying sun, painting her face in fiery streaks of orange. She felt the weight of history in her hands, the responsibility of legacy, the thrill of surviving yet another impossible encounter. Her fingers tightened slightly on the control stick, not from fear, but from the pulse of exhilaration. She had flown through storms, hostile airspace, enemy fire, and now, through the mockery of a modern generation who had underestimated her. The Phantom had responded flawlessly, every groan of metal, every roar of the engines, a testament to endurance, courage, and trust between pilot and plane. The F-22 hovered in the distance, sleek and silent now, almost deferential. Elena glanced at it briefly, noting the subtle movements of its pilot. There was recognition there, not of defeat but of respect. The Ghosthawk, scarred and patched, had bested a machine designed for supremacy. The lessons were clear. Experience, intuition, and instinct could not be replaced by technology alone. As she descended, Elena felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The Phantom groaned under the strain, but it remained solid, responding perfectly to her subtle commands. Below, the tarmac erupted into controlled chaos, crew members running toward the aircraft, cameras capturing footage, whispers of astonishment spreading through the crowd. Yet amidst the noise, the legend of the Ghosthawk had settled in the minds of all who witnessed it. She guided the Phantom down, engines roaring, landing gear extending with a practiced grace that only decades of experience could provide. The plane touched down, the tires screeching against the tarmac, and rolled to a stop as the engines hummed down. Elena exhaled slowly, allowing herself the smallest moment of relief. She had pushed the Phantom to its absolute limits, faced the ultimate challenge, and emerged victorious. But more than that, she had cemented a legacy, silenced the doubters, and reminded the world that true skill is timeless. The commander was the first to reach her, walking briskly across the tarmac. His weathered hands lifted in a salute which Elena returned. "Incredible," he said simply, though the weight of the word carried decades of acknowledgement. "You and the Phantom, you've proven everything they said was impossible." Elena nodded, allowing herself a small smile. She didn't need accolades, the plane had already earned them. But hearing it from him, from a figure who had seen so much, carried a profound satisfaction. The young pilots gathered hesitantly, awe and uncertainty mingling in their expressions. One of them, a lieutenant barely out of flight school, stepped forward, voice trembling. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say. We didn't believe it could," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Elena removed her helmet, letting the wind whip her hair as she looked down at them, eyes steady, voice calm but firm. "You don't need to say anything," she replied. "What matters is that you've seen it. Remember it. Respect the sky, respect your aircraft, and above all, respect experience. Technology is powerful, but it doesn't replace skill." The crowd had grown silent, captivated by the quiet authority in her words. She stepped from the Phantom, boots hitting the tarmac with a solid thud. Every movement carried purpose. Every glance spoke of confidence earned over decades of high-stakes flight. Crew members swarmed to the aircraft, performing checks, but even they paused, stealing glances at the scarred plane that had just rewritten expectations. Then the F-22 pilot descended from the sky, landing a short distance away. Helicopters and support vehicles followed cautiously, but the pilot approached Alina directly, helmet under arm. "Ramirez," he said, voice firm but respectful, "I underestimated you, and I underestimated the Ghosthawk. You've earned my respect, and that plane, it's a legend." Alina nodded, silent, letting the acknowledgement sink in. This was more than personal triumph. It was a validation of decades of dedication, of trust between a pilot and her aircraft. The sun dipped lower, casting the tarmac in orange and red hues. Alina looked at the Phantom, scarred and patched, engines cooling but alive. She remembered every mission, every risk, every moment of danger it had carried her through. And now she had proven that legends could endure, that history and skill could not be replaced. The Ghosthawk wasn't just a plane, it was a testament, a story written in metal, adrenaline, and courage. The young pilots, still in awe, watched Alina and the Phantom. One of them finally spoke, voice trembling with emotion. "We will never forget this. Ghosthawk, it's more than a name now, it's history." Alina's eyes softened slightly. She didn't answer immediately. Words weren't necessary. The plane, the demonstration, and the victory spoke louder than any sentence could. The commander stepped forward once more, hand on his cap, his eyes reflecting pride, respect, and amazement. "Today," he said, voice carrying over the crowd, "we've witnessed something extraordinary. A pilot and a plane that defy time, expectation, and doubt. Ghosthawk will be remembered, not just as a plane, but as a legend. And Ramirez, you've proven what it truly means to be a master of the skis." Alina allowed herself a small smile, the wind tugging at her jacket, the last light of sunset catching the edges of the Phantom's fuselage. She ran her hand along its scarred metal, feeling the history beneath her fingertips. Every dent, every patch, every faded insignia told a story of survival, of courage, of legacy. And now the story was complete. As the crowd began to disperse, whispers of awe and reverence lingering in the air, Alina looked up at the sky once more. The storm had passed, the horizon stretched endlessly, the clouds tinged with gold and pink. Somewhere beyond them the future awaited. The Phantom, the Ghosthawk, would endure. And Alina Ramirez, the pilot who had commanded history itself, would always be remembered as the one who took a mocked, forgotten jet and transformed it into legend. The Ghosthawk had faced mockery, modernity, and doubt, and it had emerged undefeated. Alina Ramirez climbed back into the cockpit one last time, engines humming gently. She gave a small salute toward the horizon, toward the crowd, and toward the future. The plane roared softly beneath her, alive, breathing, a living testament to skill, courage, and legacy. And as the sun set, the legend of the Ghosthawk was sealed.